Hi, good day. My name is Razak Adio, and I welcome you to my channel. So today, we are going to be discussing about the new updates as regards to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF 2.0. So under here, we are going to be discussing about the updates. What changed from the previous versions that we have, the 1.1 and this current one? What are the changes that we have there? And what are the addition and what was added to this framework that make it more robust? And we are going to be further discussing about the functions, the category and sub the categories that we currently have under the CSF 2.0. So let's move on. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is 2.0, the newly released version in February 26 by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And these second versions of the NIST aims to provide a guidance on managing cybersecurity risk to government agencies, industries, and as well as other organizations, regardless of the industry, the size of such an organization. And according to the Chief of NIST Applied Cybersecurity Division, Kevin, stated that the CSF 2.0 was developed by working closely with stakeholders and reflecting the most recent cybersecurity challenges and management practices. This update aims to make the framework even more relevant to a wider swath of users in the United States and abroad. So in a nutshell, it means that this new cybersecurity framework from NIST, that is the 2.0, it aims to actually expand its coverage beyond the previous one that you have in 1.1 to include virtually the government agencies, the industries, as well as other organizations, regardless of their industry and the size of such an organization. So let's quickly look at the differences between the 1.1, the previous versions, and the 2.0 that we currently have. So you can see that under the 1.1 here we have references, but 1.1 only references 5 functions, while the 2.0 is referencing 6 functions, which simply means that there's an addition, that is one addition of functions that needs to be referenced. Then secondly, it also focuses on the previous version, which is 1.1, focused on organization responsible for critical infrastructure. But here, under the 2.0, it's now focusing on government agencies, industry, and other organizations, regardless of their industry, as well as the size of such an organization. Okay, the other difference, major difference that we also have here is based on the fact that the functions reference we have identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. This is what we have in the previous version. But this current version has an addition to it, which is govern. So governance was just added to it to make it 6. So under governance, we are just going to be looking at what are those things that governance actually entails. What's identify entails. We also look at the protect. What does it entail? Detect, response, as well as recover. So, but one thing we should note as regards to this NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 is that it is important to know that this document doesn't prescribe the specific of how cybersecurity outcomes should be achieved. That is, we are not talking about checklist. So it does not prescribe a particular checklist. Okay, so let's say it's provided a checklist, but does not provide the kind of testing procedures of how to check each of these checklists that has been, and that's going to be a kind of an overview of an highlight of what needs to be, and now how it should be, which is the procedures, is not being details. So it means that this CSF 2.0 is referencing other documents as we have it in the previous version under 1.1. So please take note of that. And okay, so let's move on to here we are talking about Introduction to Cybersecurity Framework, CSF core. That is the core functions of this CSF. What are the core functions? So, as we said, that a CSF core is a set of cybersecurity outcomes arranged by what? Functions. It is arranged by categories, and then finally we have subcategories. That is, each category has a subcategories that shows what and what needs to be under each of these categories. But in details, just like what we have said, there's no a testing procedures that is being stated in these documents. You get. So the function we have are just as we earlier mentioned, we have govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. In the next slide, we are going to discuss about what are we going to be looking at. What does govern actually talks about, and then what does identify talks about, and then protect. What are you protecting, and what does this protect actually covers? The scope. We also look at the scope of dictate. So we look at scope of respond, and then we also look at the scope of recover. And then we are going to have subcategories, just like what we have here. So these are the core functions of this CSF. We have subcategories, but here let's look at the core functions, subcategories names, and identifiers. So under govern, we are going to have an organizational context, just like the way we have it in ISO 27001, our 2022 version. That is, we are going to look at organizational context. Don't forget, maybe when we get there, we are going to talk about different tiers that we have. We have tier 1 to 4, but each tiers will define the current environment of your organizations. So, you know, this new version, which is Core 2.0, you know, like we said, that it covers virtually every organization, regardless of the industries and the size. However, you can't compare a large or multinational organizations that have mature cybersecurity framework that is being adopted by them, compared to a startup organizations that have, you know, that just started operation and have few controls being put in place. So that is why organizational context will go a long way to define to what extent you can apply this framework. Then we are going to be talking about risk management strategy. So which risk management strategy is the organization going to adopt? Because that is part of the govern. Don't forget that under the organizational context we just mentioned, it talks about the structure of your organizations. You know, from your board of directors to the management to the staffs. So the board of directors will dictate the tones, right? Giving you what needs to be done by the organization's management. The management will now break it down task by task on how to achieve the overall targets or goals that being set by the board. But in the case where your organization doesn't have board, you only have management. So it's management that's going to design and set the tones of what needs to be achieved by the organizations. So the risk management, you know, it's now going a long way. How are you going to deal with risk within your environment? Then we are talking about rules, responsibility, and authorities, just like what I've defined. Then don't forget that under the govern, that's why we are going to be discussing about the policy that governs the activities or the behaviors of every staff within the organizations. You know, you have your third-party risk management, you have your password policy, you have your, you know, bring your own device, which is so a lot of policy that will be set that will govern the behaviors and the doings of your staffs. Then the oversight functions from the board to the management and to each staffs. So the cybersecurity supply chain risk management, and that's why we are talking about, you know, your third-party risk management, your third-party, fourth-party, fifth-party. So it depends on how far you can go as regards to the functions you subcontract to another party entirely, to different organizations, from your cyber and from your cloud environment, you know, to hosting your data centers, you know, in a very remote area, something like that. So here we now have category identifier. And so this is not actually being arranged in alphabetical order, but it was actually done, to, this outcome will varies by organizations. It depends on the nature of the organization, the size, and the industry you belong to, and use case, and also with individuals that are responsible for, carry out these activities to action it. And additionally, the order and size of functions, categories, and subcategories in the core does not imply the sequence. That is, you have to do governance first, identify, then protect, and the likes. But it doesn't actually imply the sequence or importance of the, of achieving them. Sometimes all these categories might not be achieved at once based on your organizational structures, or the industry you're operating for, or the size of your organizations. So it might mean that, okay, based on what is important to your organization at that moment, you set it up. You get? So the structure of the core is intended to resonate most with those charged with operationalizing risk management within your organization. So don't see that, okay, this is not being achieved. Maybe, for instance, my cybersecurity supply chain risk management was not being, achieved. So you look at your organization structure. That, okay, does this actually speak to your organization at the moment based on the structure and the size? So if not, then those that actually speaks to your organization, achieve them first. Then move on to, when we're talking about asset management, it means that your organization, you have IT assets that you need to manage, your server, your database, or your cloud environment, or your applications. So this might not be deep, whereby maybe your organization is not using a cloud environment, or probably you don't operate a data center, or probably you don't have other site that you are managing. So the one that you are managing under these assets, then you manage those assets, that is the asset management. Then you move on to risk assessment, then improving on the process. Maybe you have already identified some gap under your risk assessment, or probably in asset management. Then you move on to that. You get? So it's not being, it doesn't imply that, okay, a sequence or an importance of achieving them should be chronological order as being stated here. You understand? So then under protect, we have the subcategories like identity management, authentication, and access control, which is what we have been doing. So as an IT auditor, don't say that, okay, this does not concern you, that, okay, it's majorly cybersecurity. But don't forget, in the process of carrying out your own function within your organization, all this part is what you are still going to be, to be reviewing. Like access risk management, you are saying that, okay, risk management is not being done. So when you are carrying out your own review, all this part also speaks to what you are going to be reviewing. Then look at identity management, that is user access management on your system. Then you look at authentication, how user has been authenticated, password or a single sign-on. So you look at those things all integrated with your Active Directory. Then you look at access control, so how access is being managed. Who is giving privileged access to the systems, to the application, or to the underlying infrastructure. So when checking all these things, you see that your activities cascaded into this cybersecurity framework. So look at awareness and training, that is cybersecurity awareness and training. So every in fact, cybersecurity functions, or let me say responsibility, it cuts across virtually every staffs within your organization. It does not rest on the shoulder of your CISO, or probably your cybersecurity team, or your IT team. No, even you as an IT auditor, it rests on you. Because when you identify some gaps, you recommend the process of remediating it. And if that process is being utilized, it means that one gap of cybersecurity gap has been closed. Then we also look at data security, that is how data in your database is being managed. Then the flowing of data in motion or at rest, how do you manage it? Do you encrypt it at rest? And a TLS, was it being implemented in the motion? So all those things is part of what actually constitutes the protect part. Then you also have platform security. Then when you are talking about your application security, so we also look at technology infrastructure resilience under the protect. how resilient is your environment? So is cybersecurity review being carried out year on year within your environment to identify or uncover some areas that is not being protected, and also identify some vulnerability within your system before exploit can be imposed? Then under the third, we have continuous monitoring, and then we have adverse event analysis. So, and then under response, we have incident management, incident analysis, incident reporting and communication, and we also have incident mitigation. So how all these incidents that has been identified can be mitigated within your environment. And don't forget, the lesson learned in the process of identifying all these incidents. Incident and event is a two different things. Events can occur in the sense that maybe there is some changes to your application or to your environment, but that doesn't actually mean it is an incident. But that event can be analyzed to see that, okay, what is the pattern of the movement of those events? So through the analysis, you can identify that this has become an incident. That is something that can give them access to exploit your environment. And then start with analysis, that is by analyzing those events, what occur, how does it occur, so what gave them that access for them to carry out this incident within your environment. And then we also look at incident response, reporting and communication. How do you react to the incident when it occurs? And then don't forget that before you can react, there must be an established policies that shows the testing and that shows the procedures you must follow when incidents occur within your organization. And then reporting, who do you report to, and how do you communicate within your environment, that is within your organization, and how do you communicate with your third party that is involved or that might be impacted with the incident that occur within your organization. Or maybe the incident even occur from your third party that's also now impacting on your organization. So how do they communicate to you so that you can take appropriate corrective action? And also we talked about incident mitigation. So after this analysis, this management and the likes, you'll be able to come up with how to mitigate the reoccurrence of this incident in the future. And that's what we talk about it. So this is just a brief about what it actually entails, so that you have a better understanding of what actually changed and what you are looking for as an IT auditor, or probably when you are auditing your cybersecurity environment. You can also use this standard to carry it out. But don't forget that this standard alone cannot help you to identify the testing procedure you must follow, but you have to reference it with other NIST framework, like I think we have NIST 853, which can also combine with this function, with all these functions we have highlighted. So also the last one here we have recover, RC. Under recover, incident has been identified. Maybe now you cannot fall back on your existing infrastructure to continue operating. You have to fall back, to fail over to your data center or maybe your DR sites to continue operation, right? Or probably rely on the backups you have taken in the previous years, on the previous months, and restore them for you to start operation. So incident recovery plan execution and also incident recovery communication. How do you communicate to staff, to your external parties or your third parties that are involved in the process, or your customers as well? So these are the core as well as the core functions, categories and identifier that you have identified. So all these here are called identifier. So at the end of this video, you can check the description of this video. I'm going to include the URL, that is the NIST website URL that actually details this, that can read more about, for you to have a better understanding of what it entails. But what I'm just trying to do here is just to brief of what changed and what are the categories that are involved and what do you expect to see under each of these categories. So let's move on. Here now we are talking about the core functions of cybersecurity framework. So like we have said, we have already identified each functions, the govern, under govern. Governing it's all about establishing, communicating, and monitoring an organization's cybersecurity risk management strategy. And at this governance level, in our previous video, we talked about IT standards and frameworks, right? In which we mentioned about NIST Cybersecurity Framework in it. So in it, what it means is that in your governance, it dictates how your cybersecurity environment is being controlled and managed. And to control it, you have to have policy, which is an overarching procedures itself, either directly from the board of directors or from your management. So the policy is going to serve as a guidelines for the people managing each of these processes that leads to your cybersecurity within your environment. So under identify it talks about an organization's assets. Here we are talking about IT assets, right? IT assets like your application, your servers, your database, your network equipment, and so on. So all these things actually contribute to your environment, which is IT assets, right? Your suppliers, maybe your third party, and the risk needs to be identified, because if you don't identify risk applicable to all this infrastructure, there will be difficulties in managing them and managing them, and also to protect them. So when you identify them, so that the organization can prioritize where it should expand its defense efforts. So don't forget that we mentioned application, servers, database, network equipment, and the likes. Don't forget that amongst your application, we have some critical application that you have, in fact, at every point in time, you must defend it. Like for instance, in a banking environment, we have core banking application, right? So their core banking application is the critical application that needs to be managed and defend at any point in time. So if it goes down, it means that all the activities of the bank for the day will be put on hold, as in it will be put on hold straight away. And as a result, it's going to impact on the organization bottom line and also reputation. So you have to identify all the assets that need to be protected. Then we are now moving on to protect. How do you protect? Protecting involves implementing a safeguards that can manage an organization's cybersecurity risk. So you have identified that, okay, core banking application is one of your critical infrastructure that needs to be protected at all times, right? And then what safeguards do you think you can implement based on your environment? Maybe you have to implement some, and then you now notice that, okay, you still need to implement some as well. So as a result, for instance, now when you have your core banking application, then you have been talking about your data center management. That's okay. How do you manage your data center so that if anything happens to this core banking application, you can quickly follow? Then you have your DR site. Your DR site, it now depends either auth, code, or one that you are going to set it up. But in this case, based on this criticality, it should be auth, right? That is okay. It's in real time that everything is, replicating to the DR site from the production. And then, apart from implementing, a kind of firewall, then you have VLAN, segregation of the network, that are going to deploy on it as well. So there's a lot of, and apart from that, you have access control within your environment as well that you need to put in place. And virtual network, right? So all these things are just like some of the safeguards that you can implement to safeguard your core banking application, and that is part of protect. So you have to identify the assets and then implement a safeguards in order to prevent them from being hacked. Then we move on to dictate. You have established a policy, you have identified the assets, you have tried to put some things in place to protect those assets, right? Then at this point, how do you dictate anomalies? So these core functions involve looking for and analyzing anomalies, right? Indicators of compromise and other potentially adverse events that could be signs of an attack on your environment. And that is why sometimes we have a SIEM tool that can be used. We also have IDS and sometimes IPS that can be implemented. You know, we have intrusion detection system, and we also have intrusion prevention system, right? This prevents, but this detects. So at this point, you are detecting, right? So you use IDS to detect any anomalies, and that IDS go hand in hand with your SIEM tools that are going to deploy, that will, you know, identify some signature of an attack within your environment. So, okay, let's move on to respond. Under respond, you know, now you have put policy in place, identify critical assets, you deploy some safeguards to protect the assets. Then at the same time, you also deploy some tools or some, you know, mechanisms to detect if any anomalies occur within your environment. You can detect it on time. And how do you respond to those anomalies when it occurs? So that is what we are talking about here. So when an incident is discovered, it needs to be responded to and contained. Sometimes containing it might be that, okay, if one of the servers is being affected, for instance, yes, so you can isolate the server from the network so that having access to that single server will not give room for accessing other servers on the same network. But by the time you isolate it from the server, from the network within your environment, it means that it's only this server the access will be on. So the attack will only be limited to this server. So it won't replicate to the other servers and application or other infrastructure within your environment. And also when you have already deployed VLAN, which is virtual local area network, it means that you have already segregated the network. So for them to have access to others, they will have to try gaining access to other infrastructure as well. So at this point, you respond. This also involves analysis, then incident management, mitigation, reporting, and communication. So then under recover, let's now assume that anomalies have occurred in terms of maybe you have seen some hacking, you know, track within your environment, but all your deployed responses did not actually curtail or stopped the attack from occurring. Attack eventually occur. So how do you recover? So this is what recover part is actually talking about. So these core functions involve restoring normal operations in a timely manner and limiting the effect of cybersecurity. So if your server have already occurred, as in an attack have occurred on one server, that you notice that, okay, it's just only one server, maybe a server A. So in that case, you are trying to isolate it, right? By the time you isolate it, you are trying to reduce and limiting the effect of that cyber incident within your environment. You get? So in a nutshell, what we are actually talking about here is that govern, identify, protect, and detect should always be an ongoing process. It's non-stop. You must continue it day in, day out, every seconds. Why respond and then recover only occurs when an incident has been detected. You can only implement this because you can only initiate the response when you know that, okay, an incident has already occurred within your environment, and then recover. But these four, govern, identify, protect, and detect, it must be a continuous process within your environment. Together, these core functions help to manage cybersecurity risk throughout the life cycle. That is, the more you still have those assets within your environment, you continue to deploy all these four on them continuously. You can only deploy response and recover when an incident has occurred within your environment. So every core functions is then further split into categories and subcategories, in which we have discussed earlier. You remember? So these are what we need to, to brief you about what core function changes and what does it entails in this new Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 from NIST. Let's move on. So the core functions, as we have discussed, we have 6 now, right? Don't forget: govern, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovered. So these are the NIST Cybersecurity Framework CSF 2.0. Like I've said earlier, 2.5 and 1.1 only contains 5 functions, right? Does not include govern. But the this latest one, which is NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, it contains govern to make it a 6 function. So, and what we have discussed earlier is that this 2.0 comprises of three things. The first one is what? The CSF, which is Cybersecurity Framework Core, the core function that we just discussed. Then also it also contains the CSF organizational profiles, and then it also contains what? CSF TS. So let's take them one after the other. I think we have already discussed about the about the core. Is a taxonomy of high-level cybersecurity outcomes that can help any organization manage its cybersecurity risk, right? But when it comes to the organizational profile, a mechanism for describing an organizational current and or target cybersecurity postures in terms of the CSF core outcomes. So just like what I have said earlier, that within your environment, you can apply this framework the way it's going to be applied in different organizations, right? Because your organization's maturity level differs, and also the size of your organization also differs. So an organization with maybe 5 people, a startup organizations, the way they are going to implement this framework will differ from your organization that have over 200 people. And also an organization that have over 1,000 people with a public scrutiny processes, being applied to them. I'm talking about a public listed company, for instance, that's a very multinational company. The way they are going to deploy these frameworks and apply it to their own environment in order to safeguard their cybersecurity postures will be different from yours as well. You get? So CSFTS is just talking about the maturity levels. That is, this can be applied to CSF organizational profiles to characterize the rigor of an organization's cybersecurity risk governance and the management practices. So the way you have already been implementing different cybersecurity frameworks or probably processes to protect your identified critical assets, it goes a long way to define which tier you fall into within your organizations, right? So under here, we are talking about the core functions that we have discussed. We just discussed. We have govern, identify, protect, dictate, respond, and recover. That is the order, right? So, and apart from that, we now have the organizational profile now, right? And these are the steps. Steps to actually carry out or to review what levels of organizations does your organization fall to, the profile of your own organizations. So the scope of the organizational profile: gather needed information, create the organizational profile, analyze gaps, and create an action plan, right? Then implement action plans and update profile. This is a repetitive process. You repeat it continuously. So you don't just stop that, okay, you have to implement and that's all. No, things will change. And when things change, you have to follow this process again in order to get back to the current state that your organization should be, right? Then we are now talking about the core functions, the CSF core functions, which is the TS. I'm talking about the TS, right? Sorry, I think there is a mistake for me. This should be the TS now. So, and like I've said earlier, we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. So what does it actually, mean? So, like I've said, under tier 1 is partial. Partial simply means that maybe in your organization, you partially implement or deploy a mitigant, or adopt a cybersecurity framework in order to protect your organizations against cybersecurity events, right? So you just deploy something in order to show that, okay, you are trying to work toward improving on your processes. Then risk informed, it means that a risk assessment has been performed. You carry out different analysis within your environment. So you deploy more complex, cybersecurity framework. You implement different safe controls, different controls within your organization to protect your organizations. Under repeatable means that they have already graduated from year to year. They continuously monitoring what they have deployed at this level and continue to deploy more in order to improve the security postures of their organization. Adaptive means that they have gotten to the peak whereby a very strict standard is being deployed. They continue monitoring their environment, just like what we discussed about having a SIM tools and IDS within the environment. And they continuously improving on those processes. So this is where the difference might lies when it comes to the organization size as well as security postures. It depends on the tiers your organization fall into. So it doesn't mean that all the functions and the categories and subcategories under this current NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 will be applicable to your organizations. The only thing is that your organizational profile as well as the tiers that you fall into will make the difference between different organizations that is going to be adopting this framework. Please take note of that. You are not expected to actually deploy virtually everything here to your organization, provided your organization is maybe on the tier 1. You only deploy something that is applicable to your organization at that current moment. So if you know that, okay, your organization is now improving, they are growing, then you move on to tier 2 to actually adopt or adapt to the current situation of your organization. So as you change, as you move on, as you grow as an organization, you also need to redefine your organizational profile, then apply appropriate tiers to your organization. With that, you are going to be on the same levels as organizations that have the same size and control with you. So then finally, we are just looking at these core functions control implementation procedures. So it's just like some of the control that has been stated in these new versions of the CSF 2.0. So under govern, for instance, now, so we discussed about what does govern entails, what does identify entails, what does protect entails, and what does detect, respond, and recover entails. So these are just few controls that you might try to to check to ensure that you have it as a basic within your organization. However, don't forget that, like I said earlier, this is just like an high-level checklist, right? High-level checklist. But don't forget that for you to carry out this, there should be a testing procedure. A testing procedures that shows that these are the things you have to check, and this is how you should go about checking them, right? So, like we have said earlier, that this document is just like an high-level document. You get, and these are the levels that have been defined on each of these categories, these core functions. So, for the testing procedures that needs to be followed, so you have to reference under documents. So, like I've said, check the link that I've included in this description of this video for you to have the Excel outputs of these controls and the reference controls that you have to check for you to be able to carry out this effectively. So the first one we have under govern is understand and assess specific cybersecurity needs for your organizations. Then develop a tailored cybersecurity framework risk strategy. Establish, define risk management policies, just like what we have discussed earlier. And under here also, you develop and communicate organizational cybersecurity practices to your staff, to your internal users, and to your external users, like your third party, fourth party, fifth party, and so on. Then establish and monitor cybersecurity supply chain risk management, right? Then again, we move on to implement continuous oversight and checkpoints. So how do you carry out an oversight? It means that within your organizations, there should be someone reporting directly to your board and the management as regards to the current state of your cybersecurity. And with that, your board and the management can be able to see that, okay, yes, we are improving, right? Based on what you have carried out, because they believe that you that is reporting to them, you are an expert. You know this function that they do. So you are just only reporting to them to let them know the current state and the status of the organization. Under identified, and that's how we say that identify critical business processes and assets. It's not only assets you have to identify, You also need to identify the critical processes within your organization that if that process is down or the asset is down, it's going to impact on your organizational operations. And then again, we move on to maintain inventories of hardware, services, and system. Just like after you say you identify assets, you have to be able to keep their inventories. That is the record of those assets, systems, and services that you are actually managing. Then document information flow. How does the information flows? Because when you have a third party, there will be some sensitive information that is flow from your organization to them. And if that happens, how do you ensure that at that end, how do you protect your data? It might not even be your data. It might be your PII of your customers or the other users that actually have a business relationship with your organization. So how the protection is being done. So you have to understand information flows, how information flow from one system A, to system B, and what kind of information is being shared between this system. So, and also how do you ensure protection of those information? So if you don't understand the information flow, it will be very difficult for you to implement a protection for those information. Also, we also identify threats, because this is part of risk assessment process, right? Identify the threats, vulnerability, and risk to those assets you have identified. So if you can identify the vulnerability, which is the weaknesses within the system, and the threats that can give room for exploitation, and the other risk that might be applicable to the assets, you should be able to know how to deploy a mitigant to protect them. Then lessons learned are used to identify improvements. So if something happens, maybe a critical issues or events or incidents that actually impact on your organization. So by the time you deploy a mitigant to close it out, you should be able to document what happened, how it happens, and how you'll be able to manage, that event, so that subsequently, if something similar occurs, you should be able to follow the same process to recover your environment. Under protect, we talk about manage access, and that is where you are talking about access control management, right? Who have the privileged access to your system, and who are those people, external users, that granted privileged access to. So, and do you monitor how they carry out activities on your environment to curtail whatever they are doing that might impact on your environment? So train users, that is every user that is using that system needs to be trained so that they will know what needs to be done from that end. Protect and monitor your devices, and that's why you are talking about monitoring. How do you monitor all these people that have access to your environment and your devices in terms of your, for instance now, so sometimes in very organizational we have mobile devices like your laptops. Sometimes we have BYOD, bring your own device, right, whereby your phone is being connected to your environment. So how does your organization monitor these people? Because this is my personal laptop or my phone, right? I'm connecting it to the secure environment, which is your environment. So how do you monitor what I'm being done on my own system? So these are the tools that can be, there's a lot of tools that can be deployed and ensure appropriate monitoring. Even if there's anything coming from your own personal devices, we have Microsoft iTunes Navi that can be used, and other mobile device management tools that can also be deployed as well. Then protect sensitive data. How sensitive data is being protected? For instance now, a data at rest in your database, sensitive part. Now let's talk about password. So do you encrypt my password, or you just leave it as it is? So if it is not encrypted, it means that anybody that has access to your database will be able to see the password you are using to log on and the username. So it makes it easier for that person to use your profile to log on and perform some heinous activities that can be traced back to different users. So how do you protect that? It's also under protect. And then don't forget that we also talk about information that is moving, maybe your internet banking environment, for instance. Is a sensitive websites, right? So every user's logon, how do you manage it? Do you use TLS to ensure that it is being encrypted from transfer to your database, from the database back to this, so that at the man in the middle attack cannot be easily applied? whereby they will uncover and identify your username and or sensitive information you are sending across. So these are the few things that can be deployed, to ensure protection of your sensitive information and data. So manage and maintain software. So in terms of patching your software, because without patching, vendors have deployed patches based on the software that, okay, maybe they have identified some vulnerability that can be easily exploited. So the patch, you have to, deploy it in timely manner, and then also conduct a regular backup. So you have to keep backup of your sensitive data within your environment and offsite, so that if anything happens to your site, you still be able to recover from the offsite. And if anything happens to the server, to your application, you can quickly recover from your previous backup. So under dictates, that's as we talk about network monitoring, systems, facilities continuously to find potential adverse events. And I think we have talked about SIEM tools, which identify any events is for event management, and also IDS that can also prompt you for any intrusion that is coming to your environment. Then determine, analyze, and estimate impact and scope of adverse events. So just like what we have discussed previously, if you identify, for instance now, intrusion detection is identifying that something abnormal is coming to your environment, you take it up, you start analyzing, look at the impact, look at the patterns that event is taking within your environment, and you take appropriate controls, to mitigate it. Then also provide information on adverse events to authorized staff and tools. So even me, I'm not being in charge of monitoring this our abnormalities within the organization, but as a staff of that organization, I may see something abnormal from my end. You should be able to report to the appropriate people that are in charge. You get? So you can have SOC centers, that is your security operations centers, who are in charge. Just report to them that, okay, I noticed this. So they will be able to take appropriate actions for them to mitigate that. Then under response, we have execute incident response plan, because incidents have occurred now. You have to execute your plan. But in the case where you don't have plan, as talked about under govern, there will be an issue. And that is why this is not something you do every day or every time. So it must be established and get ready. It must be ready so that when this incident occur under dictate, you should be able to respond appropriately. But in the case where you don't have a procedures in place before the incident occur, so when the incident occur, you might not be able to contain it in an appropriate manner, and that can escalate. You understand? So that is why under govern, I think that is why they have to include these core functions. It's very critical. Categorize and prioritize incidents. So it depends on the incident levels. So you should be able to prioritize them and escalate, if need be. You understand? So when you prioritize them, the critical one, you take them first, then move on to the low critical. So you can't just abandon the very critical one that you need to mitigate immediately to a month after, and now be dealing with less critical that even within a year you can still remediate it. So you have to prioritize and categorize them. Collect incident data and preserve its integrity and provenance. So you have to collect all those data, prevent them, and preserve them, and be able to learn from them as well, so that when something of that nature occur in subsequent year or subsequent time, you should know how to deal with them. Notify internal and external stakeholders. So when that incident occurs, from your policy, who and who needs to be notified, who and who needs to be informed. So for instance now, if it involves maybe your cloud environment, that your cloud providers, you have to inform them about what happened to your environment. So it goes on and on like that. It might be on your on-premise data centers, though you have to inform your third party that is involved in that in deployment of that infrastructure being impacted. Then contain and eradicate incident. So you have to contain them and also eliminate it from your systems to prevent subsequent access to that environment. And then lastly, we are talking about recover, and that is where after the incident have already occurred, the response processes has been performed. Then you have to understand roles and responsibility, because in your role It depends where you belong to within your organization. But as an IT editor, you just need to follow up with people to see that, okay, how do you contain this, and how do you, remediate all those identified issues. Then execute your recovery plan. So maybe fail over to your data center, your DR site, and the likes. Then you move on. So double check your network, that is your backups. So in some instances, we have seen a situation where a backup is being taken, in fact, daily. But at the end of the day, when the issue occurs, you are unable to restore the backup because the backup testing is not being carried out. You don't test your backup to ensure that the data on the backup is still valid, is still relevant. So you just continue taking backup and keeping it. So at the point, if the backup testing is not done, so at the point of this, you might not be able to, at the point of recover, you might not be able to recover the previous backup that you want to reinstall, as you want to restore into your environment so that you can carry on your activities. So, and that is very critical. Under your response, there should be a backup policy. And in the backup policy, it will dictate the criticality of assets that backup needs to be taken daily. Even some, it will be taken as it is being done, like the issue of core banking application. Then communicate with internal and external stakeholders. So that, okay, yeah, we have tried our best, we have recovered from the incident, then you can start carrying on our activities. You communicate this to your internal staff, you communicate to your third party, your fourth party, your fifth party, or probably any other external vendors that is involved in the incident. So once you do all this, you should be able to, manage the cybersecurity events within your organization. So this is where you are going to be stopping today. Don't forget to check my description, the description of this video, for you to go to the NIST website to download the core function as being dictated, as being published, and also the Excel that will show you the core functions, the category and subcategories that is going to assist you in your cybersecurity journey and review within your organization. As an IT auditor, you have a lot of functions to perform here, because in a case, for instance now, backup testing, if you don't check that, okay, backup is being tested, or probably your BCM, maybe you don't carry out your business continuity management system within your environment. So you are creating a gap within your environment. So for them to recover from the incident issue might take time. So, but when you carry out this review, you'll be able to identify that backup is being taken. Yes. So how often did they take the backup? Do you see the backup test? You get, so, and so many other things that the backup and your backup policies might entails. So you have to carry out review on them, check them, so that you can be able to add value to your organization. So audit is not about, just picking an issue. You'll be able to add value. Even sometimes you can carry out an audit without identifying any gap or exceptions. So that doesn't mean that you are not doing anything. Once you have already followed the testing procedure you have already highlighted in your audit program, and then you do what needs to be done, trust me, you have already added value to the organization. You just report your positive findings, and therefore you add value. So it's not that, okay, every time you must see an exceptions. It might not be. Sometimes you might not even see any exceptions in the process. So what you just need to do, just ensure that what needs to be done, the test procedures that need to be carried out has been done. And anybody also reviewing the same process, maybe an other IT auditor, it might be an external Deloitte, PwC, EY, or KPMG. If they come to your environment, they should be able to see the same thing. As in, they should be able to report the same thing you have reported. But in a case where you are not up to the task, maybe you just carry out, let me just do it this way. You just did it and then leave it over. And that's the only situation where, an issue can come up. But in a case where you have done your own and you carry out those functions appropriately, trust me, any other auditor come to your environment will also see the same thing and report similar things you have reported. So for me, I will tell you that, okay, you as an IT auditor, you have a lot of things to perform under this new framework. Identify what needs to be done when you carry out your audit, and then you can be able to reference all this framework in your own, in your own audit as well. That, okay, when you carry your audit, you benchmark it against so and so framework, and as a result, that will be fine in your report. So anybody reading your report will know that, okay, this is the framework we adopted when you carry out this audit for this so process. So thank you. Please don't forget to to subscribe to my channel, like the video, comment if there's anything that you want me to improve on, or probably you want me to do another video on one of the other processes that I might not talk about so far. So I'll be glad to be hearing from you. Thank you very much, and bye. My name is Razak Adio. Bye for now. Thank you.